In our case, we were doing a demonstration to show contractors how to do this, so we enlisted their help in setting the seam up. So now that we have the edge of the turf trimmed up and ready for the seam, let's go ahead with the seaming process. So the first thing you need to do in the seaming process is to lay the two pieces of turf together, get them dry fit and tight up against each other. This may require you to do some stretching with the knee kicker and make sure that there's no gappage between the underlayment material of the turf, or there's no overlap as well. We want to just have them side by side as tight as possible to make sure that that seam becomes invisible when it's completely done. So a pro tip that might help you is to make a mark on the bender board or stone perimeter around your turf area, and then when you pull the turf back, you can actually use that mark to line up the center of your seam tape. By doing this, it ensures that you're able to get full coverage with the adhesive on both sides of the seam. So when you have the seam tape lined up and in place, make sure you put some sort of weight on each end to hold it into place, and then you can start applying the glue. Important to note that this glue is incredibly sticky and will stick to everything, including your hands and your clothes, and especially the turf if you get it in. So we want to make sure that we are extremely clean during this process. So putting glue down on the seam tape, we want to start to spread it with a notched trowel. And this is important because we want to ensure that we get full coverage of the adhesive over the entire surface area of the seam tape. So spread across the entire area down the full length of the seam tape, making sure you cover as much of the surface area as possible. But at the same time, we want to make sure we don't have too much glue left on the surface, because as you put the two pieces of turf down into the adhesive, we don't want to have any adhesive seeping up through the joint. If it does seep up through the seam, it's going to catch onto the blades of the turf and it's going to create significant problems with the finished look of the seam. So to ensure that we don't get too much adhesive on the seam tape, after that first coat goes down, you can go back and with your notch trowel, go ahead and scrape the entire surface to get a nice even coating. Once you ensure that you have adhesive covering the entire seam tape, that's when we take one side and press it down into the adhesive. And the reason we need more than one person for this is now as we lay down the second side of the turf, we want to maintain the one edge pulled back, and one person can lay the turf in a small amount at a time. One person can hold that turf back, making sure it doesn't fall into the adhesive. And then if needed, you can have a third person that can tighten up the joint or tighten up the seam if it's required. And we do this again with the knee kicker stretcher. So as we go through, this is a slow and steady process. We want to make sure that we're not overlapping that underlayment, and we want to make sure that we are as close as we can. And we also don't want to push those blades of grass down into the adhesive. So you're pulling the blades back, pushing the underlayment together, and then kind of weaving the turf together to hide the seam as it goes forward. For further information or any additional questions, please refer to the link and email listed below.